Hello, everyone. We are back with another edition of the Benchwarmer Sports Podcast. I'm Raffi, as always, joined by Davian. Unfortunately, Theodore lost his voice. He's battling through pneumonia right now. I believe it's anomia, not pneumonia. Just like pterodactyl. It's like no, it's not. That's not how you say it. But anyways, we're glad you're here watching this podcast. We hope you enjoyed this podcast and some of our past podcasts. Before we get into it, Davian, today's Christmas Eve. I've been running around crazy because we're hosting Christmas Eve. But anyways, how are you doing today? How's the past couple of weeks been? It's been a couple of weeks, but I'm glad we're back doing the podcast again.
Yeah, I'm doing well. I mean, went through final season, which was quite tough, to say the least. But very similar to the Patriots season in terms of it's been a rough. It's been rough. But any case, we got that done. We're out of that hellhole for now until next semester. So I'm happy about that. Rafi, how have you been? Other than glazing over Connor Bedard every single day. Guys, when I say glazing, I mean almost every day in the group chat. When anyone says anything about the Falcons, he goes, but Connor Bedard. Respectfully, though, that goal last night, the lacrosse style goal, I don't even know why they call it Michigan goal, but okay, sure. The Michigan goal, but from Connor Bedard yesterday was pretty darn sick. So yeah.
Yeah, it was scored by a Michigan player, I think probably 20, 30 years ago at this point. So that's why it's also dubbed the Michigan goal. And I love how every single time you comment on me glazing Connor Bedard, you proceed to follow up with defending my reasoning for glazing him by saying, oh, well, he made this great play. Oh, well, I get that he's like this good. So, like, yeah, it's absolutely glazing. I'm not going to deny that. But, like, you've seen the highlights. You've seen
He's good.
like he's really good.
He's really
So
good for a
and
rookie.
when I
Like
when
I
I
think
am
I
stuck
think he was
when
worth
I'm
it.
stuck watching the Atlanta Falcons while they lose 9-7 to the Carolina Panthers in one of the most predictable games ever, I need Connor Bedard to help me out here. Now the Blackhawks, if you asked what happened in the third period of that game, I would say absolutely nothing. Nothing happened in the third period. The Blackhawks did not blow a 5-2 lead with 14 minutes left because of the refs and the officiating and because the Blackhawks lost all defensive structure. Nothing happened. The Blackhawks won that game. I'm just
Yeah.
gonna follow delusion. Just like how Davian's still living in the Patriots dynasty area. Nothing's going on right now with the Patriots.
Come on.
The Patriots are so good. Max Jones, I mean, if you squint, that's more of a 12th than a 10. So like
Yeah.
it's all good. The Patriots are fine. Tom Brady's still everything's just cheeky. But anyways, before we go down a whole sports therapy podcast, which we're definitely not doing, at least on this show, the Giants haven't blown things up yet, so we won't have that deeper therapy session yet. Anywho, let's talk about college football because the college football playoff starting very soon to many Florida State fans' displeasure. A lot of Florida State fans are probably even more upset that Trey Benson, Jared Verse, and a bunch of other notable players on Florida State are sitting out not in protest to the college football playoff, but because they're all declaring for the NFL draft. We'll start off with that first game, Florida, Georgia. I think Georgia's just gonna, even with their backups, Georgia's gonna wipe the floor with Florida State. They were already gonna wipe the floor with them, even with all Florida State starters minus Jordan Travis. This is gonna be a woof.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that, and I guess I'll make my next pick. Ole Miss, Penn State. I got Ole Miss pulling the upset against Penn State. I just don't like. I think this Penn State team is good, but I think that this Ole Miss team is just better. Um, just based off their competition, based off how well they've played against that level of competition versus Penn State, which has struggled against really like against like against like ranked teams. Penn State has really struggled. Ole Miss has really shown that they can't compete. I have Ole Miss winning the Peach Bowl.
Yeah, we've seen Ole Miss again, just to keep things short and simple, because this isn't too important of a bowl game. Ole Miss can definitely put up points, and as you mentioned, you nailed it you put the nail on the head or the head on the nail, whatever you want to say it. Ole Miss has beaten some of those top teams, not Georgia, but some of the higher competition teams. While Penn State, those two losses, Michigan, Ohio State, in games where they just seemed outmatched. And when you're smoking Illinois almost every week, I mean, you're gonna inflate your record a little bit. Moving on, Auburn, Maryland. That's a game on the New Year's slate per se. I think you can go really either way. I'm gonna go Maryland here. I know
Go Maryland.
we pumped up Maryland a little bit there along with Rutgers. Moving on, another game that's on the 30th, and you might be wondering why the game's not on the 31st. That's because it is a Sunday, so the college football actually making a smart decision for once decided, you know what, we're not going to compete with the NFL. Let's move the college football playoff to January 1st, and let's move the some of the New Year's Six games to the 30th. So I understand that. Toledo, Wyoming. Toledo. Just keep it
Yeah, I'm gonna go
simple.
Toledo.
Moving on to some of the bigger games, and then that'll lead us into the college football playoff matchups. Monday, January 1st, Wisconsin, LSU. Jane Daniels probably not going to play. I don't think he's opted
Did
out
he
yet
say?
of the
Okay.
bowl game, but regardless, if he does opt out, I'm probably going to take Wisconsin too. You have Malik Neighbors, and then you have some other big weapons for LSU likely also. We're also going to opt out if they haven't opted out already. So I think Wisconsin could wind up winning this game just
Yeah.
because
Just
LSU was missing half their team.
yeah.
Continuing on, Liberty versus Oregon. This is actually a game I'm quite interested in. Bo Nix, another guy. I don't believe I've seen anything that he is declaring for the draft. He's likely going to be a second round player. Maybe slides into first round. Maybe falls into the
Yeah,
third
but he's
round.
gonna play this game.
If he is playing this game, then I got Oregon, but I think it's still going to be a fun game to watch.
Yeah, he's gonna play this game. I don't see why he doesn't. I think that there's some players, just real quick tangent. I think there's some players that just need to show off and play in these bowl games to just prove their draft worthiness. Because other than this, the only other game that they have to like really show in the highlight reel is gonna be the Senior Bowl, I think. So, that's that. I'll make my next pick: Iowa versus Tennessee in the Citrus Bowl.
Can Tennessee put up more than 10 points? Probably.
Yeah, I mean Tennessee's gonna win this. Come on, like even if Tennessee has players that decide not to play because of the draft, still Tennessee is just Iowa's offense just cannot score. Look,
Yeah.
if Tennessee can just put up more than 10 points, Rafi, like you said, they're gonna win this game. Rafi, jumping it back to you, make your next pick.
Yeah, so I do want to go. Let's go to Texas, Washington first, and give
Okay.
our take because this is similar. This kind of goes in hand with what you were saying about Bo Nix, although obviously this is on a bigger stage because it's for the national championship. Michael Penix Jr. and Quinn Ewers are also playing for a potential being a first round quarterback potentially. You
Right.
could say the same thing about JJ McCarthy as they play Alabama, but for right now, I think the more desperate guys are Ewers and then Michael Penix Jr. Michael Penix Jr. being 23, very injury riddled. He's probably slated to be around a late first, second round pick, but I mean, if he plays a great game versus Texas, I think that can definitely vault him into a further conversation for being a first round pick, at least in the 20 range of some team that might be losing a quarterback. Maybe the Minnesota Vikings if they make the playoffs, but lose Kirk Cousins. Maybe Michael Penix Jr. is their guy. Quinn Ewers, same undertone as well. I've been on the Texas train the entire year. I'm gonna go Washington here,
Yeah.
just because I was fooled by Washington a while ago, back when they got blown out by Alabama. I believe it was probably like 2016, 2017 at this point. I was really high on Washington, got really disappointed. But I mean, Odunze, you have so many weapons on Washington. I love their wide receivers. They have a good run game. Michael Penix Jr. obviously I've already pumped his tires on. I just think it's gonna be a bit too much for Texas in this game.
Yeah, I'm not gonna add more to that. I 100% agree with that. I have Texas over Washington. It's just, I'm sorry, Washington over Texas. Oof. All right, it's too early in the morning for this. But no, I think Washington's a better team. I think that being this kind of underdog heading into it, I think they kind of have more to prove. And so, yeah, I got Washington.
Now, I'm a bit nervous about this next matchup we're going to talk about because I'm scared that we're both going to agree here, and this is going to go on. It won't go on freezing cold takes. We're not large enough for that. But anyways, maybe one day. Alabama versus Michigan. I'm just getting Alabama vibes. It just feels like Alabama with the Auburn game. They just barely escaped that game. They escaped USF early on in the year. They always come back. We see this time and time again. Never doubt Nick Saban. Michigan, I think that game versus Ohio State could have gone either way. Iowa they kind of struggled with a little bit at the start, but then they wound up blowing them out later on because Iowa's offense, as we've said numerous times, is incompetent. Sorry, Theodore, you're not on the podcast this week to counter that point. Let's be
Yeah.
honest here. Iowa, yeah, they can't outscore at all. I think I'm gonna go Alabama here. I think their run defense can contain Blake Corum.
Yeah, I mean,
And
it's all goes down to the run defense.
I truly unfortunately, and this isn't in a rude way against Michigan, I just think Michigan's fraudulent this year. I don't think that they're going to be Alabama.
Yeah. Look, I will say this. I think that it all goes down to the run defense, and if Bama can stop Michigan's run, then I think, that's basically game over for Michigan. I just don't know how well they can play against Bama's secondary, which is a solid secondary at the end of the day, even, given their gaffes here and there in different games. Um, yeah, I gotta go. I gotta go Bama. It's just my gut. I gotta go Bama at the end of the day, though. That's just my
And
gut feeling.
I think the thing too is, and I think Theodore would definitely back us up on this point. Milrow, from the start of the year to now, he's really developed throughout the season
He's
to
a
do
grow.
something. He is not an elite quarterback by any means. I wouldn't say he's a top four quarterback in college football, but he's definitely developed a ton from where we were having a conversation with Theodore weeks ago where do you change Jalen Milrow? Like he sat out for a game. Obviously,
Yeah,
that was a terrible experiment that went wrong. But there was a good idea where it's like, is Jalen Milrow the guy? And it seems like by the end of this year, we've
he's
kind of
proven
come to an
himself.
understanding where he has arrived. Like he is him. He's going to be in the moment. And again, Michigan, you struggled versus Maryland. You struggled a little bit versus Penn State. And yes, this can all be forgiven. But I'd rather give the Alabama treatment to Alabama than to Michigan. And also, too, we saw this with Alabama when the lights were the brightest, when they had a must-win game versus Georgia. It wasn't a pretty game by any means, but they
No.
still were able to overcome Georgia. You can say Georgia shot themselves in the foot, also a fair point, but at the end of the day, you got to give your hat off to Alabama, who played a really good game and shut down Georgia for most of that first half.
Yeah, I'm just gonna agree with that. I think we're gonna wait to make our national championship predictions for Theodore to come back on the podcast. Hopefully he recovers by that time. Let's hop over to the other side of the NFL, the pros. The NFL. So, I mean, look, we have the Ravens who've clinched. We have the 49ers who've clinched. And those two teams are actually facing off this week, which should be interesting, given Nick Bosa playing against the Ravens. Um, just to, Rafi, what are your thoughts? Let's start off with the AFC East. I have the Dolphins winning that division, clinching playoffs. The Bills have started to look better, so I do think the Bills end up in the playoffs as a wild card team. Um, but yeah, that's my predictions for the AFC East. Rafi.
Yeah, honestly, as I play around the New York Times, I mean, I will be critical of the New York Times on another day, but I really do love their interactive playoff predictor simulation. I don't know how they made it, but as someone who loves sports analytics, I love this so much. This is great. I really feel comfortable saying that I think the Bills are going to win week 18 versus the Dolphins and take the division. Let's be honest here. They did not play a good game last night versus the Chargers as we're recording this on Saturday.
But
But
they won. A win is
they've
win.
been playing so well. They played great versus Dallas before. They played a really good game versus the Chiefs a couple weeks ago. They played very close to the Eagles, and that game could have gone either way. I know early on in the year I had the Bills going far in the playoffs. I might have even had them in my Super Bowl. I don't quite recall. It might have been the Chiefs. I think the Bills have played really well, and the Dolphins still. We haven't seen the Dolphins really beat anyone notable where I feel confident in the Miami Dolphins. Now, obviously, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and Tua, Raheem Mostert as well, who's just been in. I think he has the most touchdowns by a running back in the NFL this year, where he's at least tied with Christian McCaffrey. Like he's been insane this year too, very underrated. But I really just like the Bills to wind up winning this division. I still the Dolphins to make the playoffs, but I just feel like Buffalo is. It's all about who's the hottest team going into the playoffs. It's always very dangerous, and I think that team might be the Bills, unfortunately for a lot of the
I'm gonna
AFC.
have to disagree with that. I think the Dolphins have just been a better team all around. Like, yeah, they had a tough loss, I think it was last week or a couple weeks ago. But I just think that they're a better team. I think that their offense would like overwhelm the Bills' defense, which I know that as I say this, I know that the Bills were able to stop the Cowboys' offense, but I think there's just something different about this Miami team. But in any case, agree to disagree. Hopping over to the AFC North, Rafi, Ravens have clinched. Browns sit at 9-5. Bengals sit at 8-7. Steelers sit at 8-7. You know, we know that Mike Tomlin's only just going for a 9-8 record, so he continues to have his winning record. Um, the Bengals, you know, they're a struggling team. Lost yesterday to the Steelers. They have Jake Browning as their starting QB. Joe Burrow's not coming back. For the Browns, though, Joe Flacco have been absolutely on fire. And that is why I have to pick them as definitely one of the AFC wildcard teams with the Ravens already have clinched the division. I just think that the Browns are a really good team and they're going to continue, you know, they might not win out, but they'll do just enough to get into the wild card. And we might see a Browns Ravens playoff game.
Yeah, that'd be absolutely amazing. I mean, the storylines, we could potentially also see the Rams versus the Lions as well, and then Matthew Stafford playing his former team in a playoff game. One of the first playoff games since Matthew Stafford was on the Lions. That was the
Yeah.
last time the Lions made the playoffs, which would have been also great. Yeah, the Browns, things look very favorable for them. They play the Jets and they play in Cincinnati week 18. So both of those are definitely winnable games. There's a big game this weekend, which by the time this podcast is uploaded, you'll know the result to. Browns versus Texans. That's going to be a big game for both the Browns and the Texans. I think the Browns, as you were saying, I think the Browns definitely make the playoffs. Jake Browning, I thought has played really well the past couple of weeks, but from the limited game that I watched last night versus the Steelers, he did not look good. I thought the Bengals, the magic kind of wore off a little bit. And I mean, at the end of the day, you can only ask so much for this guy who was completely written off. It's a great story. Got cut by the Vikings 3 times, beat them last week. They
Yeah.
have a great offense still around him, but right now the problem with the Bengals is with that loss, they're currently sitting at 10th in the AFC. There's a whole list of teams. The Steelers have the tiebreaker right now because they beat Cincinnati twice this year. So I think just the math doesn't really work for them. That's why we were all out on the Bills a couple of weeks ago because just the math did not favor them
Yeah.
until they've gone on this great run. The Bengals, I think, are going to miss the playoffs. The Steelers, I can't with Mason Rudolph again. I see this kind of as like your Josh Dobbs, where it's like okay, like he comes in, he can win a game or two, but I don't think he's going to be the difference between
No,
making
you
the
can't.
playoffs. I don't think he's going to just will this team. Obviously, the
Yeah.
defense is really good, but the offense is all out of sorts. You have George Pickens who's refusing to block, but then I don't blame him. But then again, he's being a diva. But then again, every Steelers wide receiver is a diva at this point.
Yeah.
I think the Steelers, as you were saying, follow the Mike Tomlin perfect season where they go 9-8. I think they wind up missing the playoffs. I don't think we're going to see enough Steelers BS, as some might say, for the Pittsburgh Steelers to find themselves into a playoff spot. So definitely the Browns, I agree, and then I don't think either the Bengals or Steelers make it, as you were saying as well.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I Yeah, I think let's hop over to the AFC South now. So look, this week really rides on will determine the fate of a lot of these teams. The Jaguars, Colts, and Texans all sit at 8 and 6. The rankings go the Jaguars, Colts, Texans. Given I think just like the win splits, like who beat who in the within the division. Um, Look, because I have the Browns winning this week, the Texans I don't think will be able to make it. So I have the Jaguars winning the division, the Colts coming in second or third, but neither team is going to make it into the playoffs beyond the Jaguars, I think.
Yeah, I think the Jaguars, the math just works really nicely for them, especially when you play the Carolina Panthers in Week 17. Now you might say, Rafi, when do you think the Falcons would have beat the Panthers? And I'd say that's a great point, but the Falcons are terrible. We'll get into the Falcons later on in the podcast when we get over to the NFC side. But yeah, the math, they play the Panthers. I think that's a win for the Jaguars. And then you just need to beat the Buccaneers or the Titans. The Titans, you can make a great argument that they have nothing to play for, so they can play spoiler Week 18 when the Jaguars come to Tennessee. But at the end of the day, I think Jacksonville's going to find themselves into the playoffs again. My concern with them, though, is that offense just has not clicked. It started to click early in the year, and we thought that it was finally coming around, but that just hasn't happened. Calvin Ridley has been rather quiet. Now, you might say that he's going to take the Michigan way and just say, bet I'm going to be that guy and I'm going to show up in the next couple of weeks and in the playoffs. But I wouldn't count on that. I'd say the odds of that are very, very low. Thank you for listening to my full comedy show as along with this podcast. But yeah, I think the Jaguars make the playoffs. Do they do too much? I don't think so, but that's for our playoff edition podcast. I really I already said the Browns are taking one of the wild card spots, so that's already booked. And then I have the winner, either Dolphins or the Bills, whoever doesn't win the division.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say the Texans squeak into the playoffs.
I don't know. I just don't think they could.
I get that the math doesn't really work out too much. CJ Stroud is definitely a concern, and if they lose this game, the odds certainly aren't in their favor. But it's going to come down to that Week 18 matchup in Indianapolis. I mean, Texans versus Colts, and that game will quite literally decide who makes the playoffs, who doesn't. So I'm going to say the Texans win that matchup. The Texans can split their next two, and they'd still be in a great position. I think. Okay, so they can't
No.
lose both those games, but if they do, they just need to drop one of those games, and then it's just
Right.
Colts. That's going to be our NBC primetime game, almost 100%, unless some chaos happens. I think the Texans are going to wind up pulling through, and just it'd be fun too. CJ Stroud in the playoffs.
Yeah. Okay. My AFC West, I think this is where it gets interesting. Look, the Broncos can easily win out because they only go against the Patriots. Look, I'm just gonna say it. Patriots are not a good team. They're probably losing today. They lose.
What?
I know. It's crazy. Broncos win out because they beat the Patriots, they beat the Chargers, they beat the Raiders, right? All three teams which aren't that good. So you win out, you go 10-7. All of a sudden, like you do have a really solid chance of making the playoffs. That's why, to round off the AFC, I do have the Broncos squeaking in over a team like the Texans. And so yeah, that's my final pick. I think that the Chiefs end up winning this division. I know that the Chiefs haven't been playing well, yada yada, but come on, at the end of the day, it's still the Kansas City Chiefs. They're still, one of the best teams in the AFC West. And their schedule is like it's the Raiders, Bengals, Chargers. All three of those teams don't have a starting QB. They're all starting their backup QB. Those are all games that they could win. If they lose today, or they play Monday Night Football. If they lose tomorrow, which is Monday Night Football, Christmas football, might add, like then I don't see them making it. Or I see them sneaking in still as a wild card team. But look, this Chiefs team is not going to go far in the playoffs. We're going to get to that in our playoff podcast. But yeah, those are my picks.
I do want to throw in the fact too, as I'm crunching the numbers, as one might say. If the Dolphins beat the Bills in Week 18, and because I still think the Texans are going to make the playoffs, so I have the Texans making the playoffs right now. But that being said, if the Bills drop that game in Miami, the Broncos' playoff chances go up to 95%. And even without that win, before that even happens, the Broncos still have a really high percentage. So I definitely get where you're coming from. It's definitely likely. I think part of it's just because I have the Bills in the playoffs, and that's kind of what's changing things up. But if the Bills and Broncos wind up being tied with the same record, the first thing is head to head, which the Broncos have because the Bills can't count to 11 properly and accidentally counted 12th and thought that was 11. Common mistake. I make that mistake all the time. But yeah, I get where you're coming from. That's certainly something that we'll keep tabs on, and that's likely going to be the decider of who makes the playoffs between the Broncos and the Bills. That Week 18 Dolphins versus Bills matchup. Moving over to the NFC, we have first the NFC East. Sorry, Carlos. Sorry, Theodore. I don't think either of us think the Giants are making the playoffs. So let's just move
No.
on to the matchup that actually matters: Eagles versus Cowboys. Either team, do we think either of them have a shot at the bye week? I think just the Eagles are going to wind up taking the division just because they have the tiebreaker right now. So I think in all likelihood, they're just going to hold on to it. You play the Giants twice. They have a very favorable schedule the next 3 weeks. I think the Cardinals are the other team that they're playing. I like the Eagles here winning the division. I don't think they're going to get the bye week, though, just because the Niners are just they went through that slump, but they're just on a mission right now. I really think that they're the best team in the NFL at the moment.
Yeah, I can see you say that. Yeah, I think the Lions are one of the best teams in the division. Speaking about that NFC North, talking about the wild card position, do we think anybody else from that division makes it into the playoffs? The Vikings sitting at 7-7 with their struggles that they have at the quarterback position now, with Josh Dobbs not playing that well last week. I just don't see it happening. So I think we could just jump over to your division, Rafi, the NFC South. So look,
I do want to add real quick before we get into this because I'm trying to put this off as much as I want to because I really don't want to talk about it, but we will talk about it. I just want to say too that the Packers versus Vikings in Week 17 is going to decide both their fates. Now you can make the
yeah,
argument that the Packers decide their fate when they decide to lose to the Giants, and then they followed that up by losing to Tampa. But that game is someone is gonna wind up making the wild card in the NFC. And although the AFC 7 teams definitely has bode well and was a good decision by the NFL, the NFC we're looking at some pretty mid teams to bring
yeah,
out some of the jargon from people our age. And then just talking about the wild card in general, you have the Rams. I think the Rams are likely going to get into the playoffs. The Seahawks have a favorable next couple of weeks too, although they do play the 49ers. So that Vikings Packers game is it's probably going to decide who winds up making the playoffs because I think either one of those two teams is probably the most likely team to get the wind up with the seventh overall pick. So
yeah,
yeah, let's talk about my Atlanta Falcons because they had an amazing opportunity. They've lost to the Cardinals, they've lost to the Commanders, they've lost to the Panthers. Those 3 teams are all eliminated right now, and if they had those 3 wins, they would be running away with the division. They'd have a 99% chance. They'd have a chance to clinch the division this week, and they just completely pooped the bed. They lost to Tampa too, last second touchdown. That was also phenomenal. Fire Arthur Smith, Desmond Ritter. I'm sorry, but he's not the guy. I think the Bucks are going to take this division. I just think the math just works out for them really nicely here. They had a great win versus the Packers. Baker Mayfield is motivated. If they make the playoffs, he gets $1 million, and I'd be sure as heck motivated to win a game if I was given $1 million if I won it. Now, would I
uh-huh,
win? Probably not, but maybe behind the Niners. Maybe. I just have to give the ball to Christian McCaffrey, and I think I'm fast enough to hand Christian McCaffrey the ball a bunch of times. So
yeah,
I'd like my odds there. But going back to it, you look at the Buccaneers. They beat the Panthers. They're already up to an 84, 83% chance of making the playoffs. And that's just, you have to beat the Jaguars or the Saints in week 16 or 17. And then that doesn't even cover the fact, too, that the Falcons are bound to slip up at some point. So that eliminates them by proxy. And then the Saints, too, are walking a very, very thin wire where you can make a very good argument, too, that if the Saints were to slip up at any point, that essentially would put the Buccaneers easily in on top of the NFC South, which is honestly, and as much as bitter as I am about this, I got to give my props to Tampa this year. They were a team that
yeah,
I think a lot of us counted out, and Baker Mayfield said that quite literally, and he had a great year, and I think Tampa's defense showed up. Mike Evans, I think you have to resign him if you're Tampa. I mean, if you want to come to Atlanta because you're just that mad at Tampa, go for it. I won't hold you back. We could use another wide receiver in our system alongside Drake London, but yeah, props to Tampa, and I really do think that Tampa's gonna wind up winning this division. I don't think the Saints or Falcons wind up making the playoffs.
yeah. So look, I have the Bucks. I think the Bucks make it to the playoffs. I think that the Falcons play spoiler to the Saints by beating them in Week 18. Um, and then, so I think we hop over to the NFC West now, where we have the 49ers who have clinched at 11-3 right now. There's, you know, I know you said, Rafi, that the Lions are the best in this division. I'm going to stick by what I said in the preseason podcast. The 49ers are still, I think, the best in this in the NFC North. That's right, in the NFC, not the division
Conference. Yeah,
itself.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um, so I have the Rams. I think making the playoffs. I think that with yes, the Seahawks. I love that Drew Lock story, and yes, they do have a chance still. But let me just quickly look at the Rams schedule before I say anything too stupid.
Real
Um,
quick though, to hop over you while you're looking that up, so we don't have any dead time. The
yeah,
Seahawks, if they win out, 99% chance. They beat the Steel. I think they have a favorable schedule. I think they could win out. They have at Tennessee this upcoming Sunday. Then they play the Steelers at home, and then they play in Arizona. So I think 3 winnable games for Seattle. Even if they slip up and lose to the Steelers or even lose to the Titans, their playoff percentage is still 60 to 66%. So still very good odds. And once again, as we were saying, if we expect the Packers to potentially take down the Vikings in that matchup, I think that essentially will eliminate both teams at the end of the day. So I do
right.
think that the Seahawks and the Rams wind up both making the playoffs, and the Niners likely pick up that
Yeah,
bye.
I could see that happening easily. The Rams have the Giants and then the 49ers. and I think the 49ers bench most of their players in that game because I'm guessing they will probably clinch. Actually, wait, would they
So
clinch?
the Niners right now have a 1-game advantage over both the Cowboys and the Eagles.
Right.
So the big question would be, they're going to beat the Commanders in all likelihood. I think that's a safe bet to make. Now, if they lose to the Ravens on Monday night, which is definitely a possibility, there's a chance where if they lose to the Rams week 18, which is possible because the Rams are likely going to need that game to make the playoffs, the Niners will likely not get the bye week. So the Niners just need to win 2 of the next 3, and they'll get that bye week just because they have the tiebreaker over both the Cowboys and the Eagles and a 1-game advantage. So Niners, you win out, don't need to worry about anything. Or at least if you win your next 2 games, you don't need to worry about week 18. You can bench your starters, you're all set. But if the Niners do find themselves in a situation where they will drop one of those games either Monday night versus the Ravens or versus the Commanders some way, somehow,
Yeah.
then things get a little iffy. But I think the Niners are going to take care of business because they haven't shown any sign of weakness since I think like week 5 when they went on that weird 3-game losing streak.
Yeah. I agree with that. And I guess that wraps up our NFL predictions. Am I right, Rafi?
Yeah, let's just go real quick. So I have AFC, I have Ravens, Chiefs, Bills, Jaguars, and then my wild card teams are the Browns, Dolphins, and then I also have the Texans. And then for the NFC, I have Niners, Eagles, Lions, Buccaneers, and then the Cowboys, Rams, and Seahawks as my 7.
Got it. Okay, so I'm gonna mess this up, but I have the Dolphins, Ravens, Jaguars, Chiefs, and for my wild card teams, I have the Bills, Browns, and
And then
Broncos.
Denver, you're saying? Yeah.
Yes. In the NFC, I have the Cowboys. Actually, wait. Yeah, no, I have the Eagles winning the division. I have the Lions, the Bucks, the 49ers. My wild card teams are, of course, the Eagles, the Rams, and the Seahawks. Because, like I think what we discussed, the Vikings and Packers basically eliminate each other.
Yeah, absolutely. So that'll do it for this edition of the Benchwarmer Sports Podcast. We hope you enjoyed. Obviously, college football season is coming to an end, which is unfortunate for both of us because we both love it. But at the end of the day, it's going to be great. We'll see what happens on the next show or two. We'll talk about our college football playoff predictions and along with who we have winning the national championship. And hopefully, Theodore will be on for that. Maybe Alabama will beat Michigan, so that'll be even more of a fun show where we will definitely hit our quota of roll tides. We hope you enjoyed. Enjoy NFL on Christmas. Enjoy NBA on Christmas as well. I know a lot of people like watching that too. So for Davian, for me, we hope you have a great holiday. Merry Christmas. Happy Kwanzaa. Happy Hanukkah. Happy New Year as well. If we don't, I think this podcast will be up later this week. So yeah, happy New Year. And we hope you have a good one. See ya.
Peace.